What's going on, everybody? Thanks again so much for joining me. My name is Jeremy. I'm a motion graphics designer, animator, and 3D hobbyist. This show is an unrehearsed screen recording of my workflow and a peek into my journey to develop a deeper design skill set. Here it's not so much practice makes perfect, but more practice makes progress. This is The Drill. Alright, this week we are getting back into some X particles. This time I'm just doing some simple stuff with spheres. At first I was just playing around with some generators, I'm playing with turbulence and rotators here. Ultimately what I wanted to use was turbulence and rotators and just kind of test particle on particle collisions. So I didn't ultimately end up using any turbulence in this case. It was just the rotators, simply the rotators. So I was inspired by some Instagram posts of several different artists using X particles to generate these massive cloned out kind of looks, with a lot of the dynamics that X particles allows. So what I'm doing right here is building, just doing a quick simple model of a container to hold this. I was using bools to cut out a circle from a cube, and then because I wanted to get a rounded edge on that, and then wasn't really able to do that, and then realized probably a simpler way to do that would just be a tube shape. So I'm using a tube with a disc underneath it, very simple setup. And as far as my X particles setup, I have an X particles, I have an emitter that is doing one shot of, I believe ultimately I went with 10,000 particles, but for testing purposes I was doing anywhere from 50 to 100 particles just to kind of spin things around and see how it was going. Right here I was doing a little bit more modeling to build a room around this, and I was debating whether using an overhead area light or an HDRI just to light this. So I think I ultimately went with an HDRI. I liked the lighting I got was a little more natural looking. It was probably because I was just blasting it overhead with an area light, so it wasn't doing that, but it just didn't look that nice. So anyway, what I was thinking about doing here was building some texture materials in Photoshop and then applying those, but I ultimately used French Monkey's Retina pack and found a cool pattern. So it was just a rough black and a glossy black for that particle. So I kind of went off on a tangent there. Sorry, my setup for this is I have these particles swirling around. They're being affected by a rotator. And then I have an X particles generator with a sphere, just a 1 centimeter sphere in it, and there are particle on particle collisions. So what I was doing here was testing everything out to what I really ultimately wanted to do was get this whirlpool kind of effect, and I wanted to try to do that just with a rotator and try to build up my experience and building up different techniques with X particles rather than just going for something like a vortex. I think is one of the modifiers in there that I think kind of does the same thing. So what I was doing, and what you won't see here, because I after I stopped recording I realized what my mistake was, but I built a fall off on the rotator so that it was my circle was 100 centimeters around, and 100 centimeters radius rather. And what happened was my fall off was too high, so I was getting all these particles spinning at once, and it just almost looked like I just put the whole thing on rotate. And it wasn't until I stopped the render, I was about halfway through and realized it looked really off. I went back to the beginning and changed that fall off so that it actually fit the circle that I was working with, and then that's how I got this whirlpool kind of effect where the stuff in the middle was moving a lot fast. The dead center is not moving that fast, but then it's moving a little bit faster on the outside, and then the total edge of it is not moving that fast at all. Then as far as the compositing, I just kind of talked through that whole part right now. It's very basic. I put some real smart motion blur on this to get a little more realism just in the motion blur, so it didn't look so rendered. My only other note I just want to have is the generator setup in this. I actually had a black, white, and orange spheres duplicated into that generator, and that's how I got that range of colors. And there's the render. It was a fun test. It was a quick little activity. I've actually been working on some stills that are, separate from the drill, where I'm trying to just do animations. So had a lot of fun in cinema this week, but this is what I have to show for it as far as animation goes. So you can see a little bit of issues with the collisions where some of the spheres are floating on top of things. What I'll definitely do is get in a little deeper with the collisions and figure out what's going on, and figure out a better way to set that up so it looks more realistic without also killing the computer. So that's it for this week. Thanks so much for watching, so much for staying tuned. I really appreciate everyone who has been subscribing. The support is really inspiring. If you've watched this far, please consider subscribing. You know how YouTube works. Like, share, subscribe, and comment down below. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitch at Jeremy_Walker. That's JRMY_WLKR. And you can visit my website for updates or shoot me an email at jeremy@jeremywalker.com. Thanks again so much for watching. I can't wait to see you all next week on The Drill.